Welcome once again. I almost forgot to hit the record button, so now we are officially recording. Welcome to all of you who are joining us for this Vantage Point 3 webinar, The Life of a Leader, Rhythm or Balance. The purpose of this webinar today is to encourage and challenge your leadership with others. Each fall, we at Vantage Point 3 try to have a webinar as an opportunity to talk to those of you out there who are leaders in life, and our perspective is that everyone in life is a leader in our own context, in our own setting, whether you're the leader in your organization or your business or your church or your family. We are all leaders in some capacity, and so each fall we try to have a Life of a Leader webinar. So welcome to this one, and like I said, our purpose here is to encourage and challenge your leadership with others. And why we chose this topic, rhythm or balance, is last fall, Pam Edwards, one of our panelists and a staff member here at Vantage Point 3, was leading a group of pastors and lay leaders in a program we call the Vista program. She was leading a little workshop with them on this topic, and as I sat through it, I listened, took a lot of notes, and afterwards I said, Pam, this is a webinar. This is something that more than just this group of people around the table need to hear. That was such a blessing to me, and I was excited to pursue that and challenge and encourage Pam to help make this happen for a larger audience. So it's great to have this opportunity to be here with all of you. And so we felt a nudge to engage the topic further and trust that the Spirit is up to something very good in our coming together today. So I'd just like to say a quick prayer as we begin our time. So if you would join me in a quick prayer. Father God, may your Spirit, in fact, be generous with us in our unique lives and in our time together here today. We thank you for your presence. Amen. So once again, welcome. The Life of a Leader, Rhythm or Balance. We have three great panelists with us today, and all providing a slightly different perspective, but also they wanted me to make sure to let you know that none of them consider themselves experts on balance versus rhythm, just fellow journeyers along the path of figuring out what all this means in our lives. So our first panelist today, and as we show them, they will have an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit. So our first panelist is Pamela Edwards. Hey, Pam, it's great to have you here.
Hey, yes, hi, Brent. Thank you. Welcome to everyone. It's a privilege to share in a part of your day. It brings me a big smile to think of many, many of you. My interest in this topic began over 20 years ago, believe it or not, and I was a graduate student at the time and in my 30s, and was just really challenged myself with the container of time and my days and my weeks, my months, and a deep desire to live my life as a leader as well as I possibly could. And my curiosity and my way of learning has always been to visit and watch and observe other people. And so that was a focus of my research at that time around leaders' lives, and I would say that continues today. I'm deeply curious about how leaders live their lives, and so I come as a learner and an observer, and I've picked up a few things along the way.
Thanks, Pam. It's great to have you. Our second panelist, in no particular order, by the way, I'm having a little trouble with the PowerPoint here. There we go. Is Jeff Scheidak, which I'm curious to know how many of you listening would have actually pronounced his name correctly had you just looked at it before I pronounced it. But anyways, Jeff Scheidak, it's great to have you on the panel.
Hi, Brent. It's good to be here. And those who want to remember how to pronounce it, just remember a bashful physician. It's a shy doc, and then you'll have it. I'm currently the Dean of Students at Calvin Seminary, and I've been in the position now in my third year. Prior to that, spent 20 years as a pastor in West Michigan and in Iowa. And through those years, had a heart for other pastors and other leaders, that they would be able to finish well in the ministry that God had called them to. Saw a lot of them falling by the wayside, getting into struggles and losing joy in the work that they were doing. And so my interest is in helping leaders, helping pastors to be able to finish well, to be able to have joy in the journey. And one piece of that that I have learned and discovered along the way is developing an ability to live into the rhythms of the calling of the life that God has given to you. So, yeah, my interest is in helping pastors and leaders to finish well. I'm also currently leading a group in our church here in Grand Rapids through the Vantage Point 3 journey process. I led a number of groups in Iowa as well, and so it's a delight to live some of those things out in the Vantage Point 3 context as well.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And our third member of our panel is Matthew Birch. It's great to have you also, Matthew.
Thank you, Brent. It's just a privilege for me to participate with all of you, all the attendees. I, by trade, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and was raised in California. Don't hold that against me, anyone out there. I came to the Midwest and established a private practice, and I've been doing this for 20 years. But along my journey, I've developed some expertise in organizational development and leadership coaching, leadership development, and have participated with Vantage Point 3 in a meaningful way by doing certain all-day retreats and presentations on leadership and anxiety in the system. So it's wonderful to be a part of this. My interest in this topic is not only personal, but it's professional, because I find myself working more as a sniper rather than an upfront person. I'm more behind the scenes, helping to empower and coach and help people to be more effective with their time and their talent.
Great, thank you. So all three panels, as we talked this week, what I'm excited about is there should be a great combination of some deep theory and some pretty, I suppose you could say some pretty heady stuff that these three will be talking about, but there's also very practical application that will be brought up. And so I'm excited based on some of the earlier conversations we had. Our format today, as we talked in the last couple weeks, the four of us have prepared a few questions that we think you as listeners will find engaging. And so as you are listening, I encourage you to write a note or two to yourself, have a piece of paper out, be taking some notes. Also, don't hesitate. I believe somewhere on your control panel there is a questions tab. So if you have a question that comes up as people are presenting, don't hesitate to type in a quick question because we will have some time towards the end. We're hoping the last 10 minutes or so where we'll be able to respond to some of those questions that you have that come up. And as those questions pop up, if they're timely and if I catch them here in time, we may use those and add to the discussion as on the fly as well. So don't hesitate to be typing in those questions, be thinking about some of those things. The other thing is, as we begin to finish the webinar, as we get to a close, or as you need to maybe log off or sign out early, we have a quick 3 questions at the end, things that we would value your feedback from. So as you log off, you'll have a quick 3 question survey, and so we just ask that you fill that out and give us some feedback on how we're doing and some other thoughts that you might have for ways that you could benefit for future VP3 webinars. So as we look at Psalm 90 verse 12, just a good reminder in this rhythm and balance. Teach us to make the most of our time so that we might grow in wisdom. Now the background picture here, you can't see. If you kind of squint your eyes and cock your head to the side a little bit, you can see faintly in the background we have a little bit of a dichotomy. We've got the balancing rocks, but in the background we have the waves crashing on the beach shore. So even in our image, we have a little bit of the combination of rhythm and balance. So here we go. Hold on tight. This was a pre-question that we sent out to all of you. You may have gotten that email yesterday at noon that had this pre-question, something for you to think about. And we just thought we'd take a couple minutes and have the panelists respond to their thoughts on this pre-question of, as you think about your life as a leader, are you more drawn to the word rhythm or balance? And we have a couple of thoughts on kind of comparing these and some other words to go along with that. So let's just start. Let's just go in the order that we had the introductions. Pam, what is your initial response to this pre-question that we sent out?
Thank you, Brent. Well, I'll say quickly that when I was beginning my research, I was very drawn to the word balance. Now, again, this was 20 years ago, and I thought that it was possible to try to balance my life, and that seemed like a good goal. But as I spent time with 3 leaders over a 5-year time and just lived into their days and their lives and watched and spent time with them, what I observed over a period of time is that they weren't balanced at all. They were high-performing people. Their schedules were fully packed. But what I learned over time is that they had a focus to their lives that was very very likable. And so whether you knew them as someone from church or a work colleague or a neighbor or a friend, you knew the same things about them. You saw them in the same ways. You knew what they cared about. Their focus of their life was incredibly clear, and it was very, it drew you into them. So there seemed to be, and I came from spending time with them, it seemed to be a rhythm to their lives that was very different than this paradigm of balance that I had originally discovered. And so that's kind of the backdrop of my own learning, and the draw to the word rhythm to me has this inviting feeling that I'm listening to someone, that I'm hearing God's voice, and that I'm not going up against this structure of I guess the word balance, where there's not enough of me, that I have to chop myself up somehow. It's a very different paradigm, and for me it has become very, very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. It's good to hear your backdrop, your perspective, where you're coming from, as well as your thoughts on looking at both of these words and how there's an interplay between the two. Jeff, what were your thoughts on this initial question?
Balance is a very popular sort of term these days, and there are places in life where you do want some balance. You want to eat a balanced diet, for example, but balance can be a dangerous word. In fact, Mike Yaconelli talks about balance being dangerous, because if we're trying to find balance in our life, we're going to control our life. We're going to keep it within the bounds of what we know and what we can handle, and God may call us to things beyond. As Pam said, what we really want to do is be listening for God in our lives, listening for the patterns that develop in our lives. Biblically, I don't see a whole lot of balance in the scriptures. You look at the life of Jesus, for example, and there was not really a balance in his life. There were times when he was caught up in the work he was called to do and following into that, healing people on the Sabbath, for example, rather than waiting until Tuesday, when they could have been just as easily healed, and yet at the same time saying, I need to take time to get away. I need to find these times to go to a quiet place, a deserted place, and to pray. And so rather than there being a balance, it's more of a rhythm. Ecclesiastes talks about a time and a season for everything, and having spent 15 years in Iowa in a rural community, you learn to appreciate the rhythms of seasons. In Iowa, during planting season and during harvest season, you don't ask a farmer to participate in different activities because there's no time. Their life is out of balance, but it's completely within the agricultural rhythm. 20 years as a pastor, there's a rhythm to the pastoral work. Most of you may note there's a Sunday in every week. They tend to come up very frequently, and you have to learn to live into those rhythms, whether it's daily or weekly or seasonally, or the rhythm of a lifetime as you go through various seasons. So I like what Pam said. It's about listening for God, listening and paying attention to your calling and the world around you to live into the rhythms that you have. I find that to be a much more helpful term than to try to keep my life in balance. I would rather be in the rhythms God has called me to.
Yeah, and as we talk and as you hear Jeff, that was, for me, that was hearing Jeff's perspective on that, and the explanation in there was very eye-opening and enlightening to me in many of those things. He putting good words to some thoughts and some struggles in my own mind. So thank you very much, Jeff. Matthew, what were your
Yes.
thoughts?
Well, I appreciate what the previous people have said before. When I think of balance and rhythm, I'm reminded when I was a child and I played on the playground, and I remember the seesaw. Now, I'm dating myself, but the seesaw was a fun thing on the playground. And I remember being a little intimidated when a heavier kid would get on the seesaw, because what that meant was I was going to go flying. So, like Jeff said, there are things that we really need to keep in balance that are weighted. But when it comes to leadership and being able to take on everything that comes our way, I think rhythm is a more effective word, because rhythm suggests flow. It suggests more of, like Psalm 90:12, it's a learned ability, not just simply a given capacity. Where balance is like a seesaw. It's measurements. If you got 100 pounds over here, you got to have 100 pounds over here. So sometimes when things come our way, events, relationships, circumstances, we feel like we have to throw the same amount of weight or energy towards resolving those things, and it may exceed our capacity, to where rhythm suggests more of a flow, a focus, and a presence, and that's something that we improve on as we continue to grow in wisdom.
Yeah, all those are such great perspectives. And as Pam, Jeff, and Matthew, as you were talking, it kind of led right into our first set of questions. And believe it or not, if you're listening, we did not plan that way. I didn't say, well, Matthew, why don't you say this? And that'll lead really nicely into this first question that we have. But I will say, nice work, Matthew. That leads us very, very nicely into this first kind of set of questions that we have. And that first question is, when you think of your life as a leader, do you think about it and I always feel like I pronounce this wrong, there are multiple ways, but in an integrative way, or more in silos of activity that don't overlap? And especially considering a lot of the people that we work with are in the ministry, this is a pretty significant question for people in the ministry, and something that I think is a good challenge for all of us in the ministry to be thinking about. So, in thinking of your life as a leader, do you think of it in an integrative way, or integrative way, or more in silos that don't overlap? And so, let's start with Jeff. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, it makes me think about years spent in parish ministry, particularly in those contexts, two of the congregations where I was living in a parsonage that had an office in the home, so I wasn't going to work. I was doing work from home, and so there was in some ways, almost a blurring of those lines between being a father and a husband and taking care of things in the home and the work that I was doing in the office. I know there are times now that I'm working at the seminary, I have to drive home, and there's some decompression time between, a little chance to shift gears. But really, all that we do, all the different roles we have, all the different places that we are at work, really should flow out of who we are, out of our identity in Christ, out of our being, and from that flows the things that we do. So really, I guess I see more of a whole there, that I'm the same person, whether I'm at home functioning as a husband and father, whether I'm a pastor at a council meeting, whether I'm here at the seminary with students, whatever it may be. What I need to be doing is living out of who God has made me to be and following that rhythm, that idea. I'm listening. Music will change. It's a different sort of music when I'm at a church meeting versus when I'm at home with my family. So it's up to me to be listening to the music change and live into the rhythm of that moment. So each role I play, it's not that I become a different person. It's not that I'm putting on masks or anything to try to fit into a situation, but rather who I am, it remains the same. I'm just learning to to dance to that new rhythm, that new music in whatever context I'm in. So there are different tasks we have, different things that we do in terms of those silos, but really I'm an integrated whole who lives in those different contexts based on hearing the rhythms of those contexts and enjoying the dance of each sort of music.
Yeah, that one, your perspectives, Jeff, are in some ways a hard reality for people in ministry. But I think it's important. I think it's a great thing the way that you mentioned how we are a whole person, and in different settings and in different contexts, we don't completely change who we are, and so therefore there needs to be some integration. We're integrating our lives throughout. I think that's a great perspective, and I think also in many conversations I have, there's almost more frustration when pastors or people in ministry try to compartmentalize. There's frustration in not being able to compartmentalize. And so your perspective, I think, is a really helpful one to see how we are the same person, and I'm an integrated person. I very much appreciate that perspective. Thank you, Jeff. Matthew, your thoughts on integrating or silos? Is there overlap or no overlap? How do you view that?
Yes, I'm going to piggyback on what Jeff said because I think he laid the foundation for us panelists to be able to converse on this. I want to go to Proverbs 4:23 because Proverbs 4:23 says that the heart is the wellspring of all true living. The Hebrew definition of heart is the place where the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical, as it concerns our will, intersects within us, wherever that is. As well, when I think about integrative, it comes from the word integrity, and the root word in the Latin of integrity means to make whole. So within all of that, I think we do have roles where we have to throw energy different places. But as a Christian, if we are going to experience a wellspring that we can really, truly draw water from every day that's refreshing, that's full, that's vibrant, and that it gives us purpose and focus, it has to be integrative. It can't fragment any one piece of our humanity. As we look at the life of Christ, he was 100% whole in all aspects of his humanity, and his focus was laser focused, and we can all observe what came about as a result of his purpose and plan here on earth. So definitely integrative.
And both of you alluded to and even tying back into the rhythm. And Jeff, you were talking about the music, and the music may change, and even Matthew talking about the laser-like, your focus. And it's important to realize that the rhythm implies a listening. And I'm hoping I'm not stepping on Pam's toes, because I think it might have been in talking with her that the rhythm implies a listening. And all throughout the gospel, Jesus is talking about, I only do what the Father tells me. And that rhythm then implies that listening. And how do we get that laser-like focus? Yeah, it's that listening. So thank you. Yeah, I we're all starting to see why I am just a moderator and not one of the panelists. For those of you that are listening, so that's good stuff. Thank you very much, Matthew. Pam, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I can't, but I'm quite a fan of the blurring of our lives in an integrative whole, but I cannot separate my way of coming at that from my gender because it just seems like everything blurs together as a woman, as a mom and a spouse and a contributor in ministry or the workplace. And I have never found that to be a bad thing. I have always found that to be like it just multiplies the creativity and the contribution. And so I feel like I can get as good of an idea for a teaching curriculum while I'm stirring soup as and vice versa. You know, I can be working on a curriculum and it seems like something will come to me about a conversation to have with one of the kids. And so I have enjoyed the integrative view of things, I think, my whole life, and can't separate it from my gender, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. Good to have your perspective as well. Um, Tying right into that, and Matthew, Jeff, and Pam, you all, in essence, alluded to it because this question kind of lays the foundation for this next one. What are your thoughts on these competing parts of our lives, the things that some of us may tend to feel like we need to silo or separate, but all of you are alluding to this integrating these different competing parts. Competing, I'm throwing up my air quotes as I say competing, but do you think those competing parts of your life, do they energize you or do they empty you? And how do you deal with that, the dichotomy of the different competing parts? And all of you kind of alluded to it a little bit in what you were saying, but even to use Matthew's word, to hit this particular topic with a little bit more laser-like focus. Matthew, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this was a harder question because on one hand, these competing parts, depending on how we interpret the word competing, they can be energizing because it offers variety. But if these competing parts are so dissimilar that for them to oppose each other, then that can create a tremendous amount of anxiety. And anxiety is very draining and emptying. It's different to be fatigued because I gave it my all, or to be fatigued because in giving it all, there was nothing in the internal reward that I felt energized by. And I think that's where, when I watch leaders, they have the ability to just actualize better this balance of the energy within us, because it becomes more of an energy management as opposed to just making sure that all your priorities are right and you're aligning everything that you think is important to you. I think that's as best as I can answer it, Brent.
I would say that, yeah, I would say that's a pretty good one. I like the perspective of energy management and how competitive are they, as well as how you mentioned, are you tired because you gave your all, or are you tired because and I didn't get it written down perfectly, but the value of what you are doing, you're having a hard time identifying the significance of that, something to that degree you said. But that's a great question.
That's correct. Yes.
It's a very good question. Thank you, Matthew.
Yes.
Let's go in reverse order. Jeff.
Well, I think of this in terms especially of the years I spent as a pastor. As a pastor, you have a certain degree of freedom and flexibility in how you arrange your week, how you arrange your schedule, how you arrange your days. And I think of those aspects of the ministry. There were some that that really did bring energy, that were satisfying and fulfilling. I couldn't wait to do them, and I may have been tired afterwards, but it was that good sense of tired that Matthew was talking about. And there are other things that are just tasks that need to be done, and you got to get them done. And with the flexibility as a pastor, there was an ability to try to create a rhythm in the week so that those things that were draining were in a pattern that allows them not to be too wearing, too draining. So part of it, again, is getting back to listening to who God has called you to be. What is your place? What's the job that you do? What's the task that you do? What are you doing at home? What's your family life looking like? And being able to listen to where the Spirit may be leading, where He may be prompting in certain areas, and to move forward in some areas and pull back in others, and find that way of living into your life that does bring the most energy. There are things that you may have on your plate out of necessity, or things that somebody asked you to do and you didn't know how to say that word no, which is an important word, and you end up doing them and you become drained. There's a need to listen and to say, is this part of who God has made me to be, what He's calling me to be? How does this lay out in this time, in this week, in this season of life? How can I lay it out in a way that doesn't drain me, but rather energizes me by being able to do a variety of tasks? I like Matthew talking about the variety, and it can be energizing to do that. But part of creating the energy out of that variety is in listening carefully to how it can fit into a day, a week, a month, a year, a season of life.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, what as I'm listening to you, and as I've listened to both you, Jeff, and Matthew, once again, you have great things to say, and at differing levels of practical application and theory, and the way that your conversations integrate, and you, as all three panelists talk, I feel like we're getting the full spectrum of application and theory, and yeah, I'm so enriched by this. So I'm excited, Pam.
Well, just to, yeah, I love what Matthew and Jeff are saying as well, and it makes me think back to those leaders that I followed around for a long time, and the thing that I noted in them and that I desire so much for myself and others that I watch and work with is that this constant refining of our ability to know when to say yes and when to say no. I think both Matthew and Jeff were saying things about this. And I think there is a growing in wisdom that happens as we get more in line, align ourselves with the giftedness that God has put in us. And as we listen and visit with God about that, I think we get better. And I think that as I'm now in my 50s, I certainly do a better job of hitting a pause button and visiting with the Lord and getting clarity before I make a big yes or a big no. And I, over time, am learning that is contributing to a greater degree of alignment with my giftedness and a greater degree of focus. And I think that's what I saw in the leaders that I studied in my research. And it was something that then there was this incredible energy that was put forth in a more narrowed, focused way to the things that they cared so much about. So it's a process, but I can see over time how that develops.
Yeah, thank you. And as we look at as we think about this, there's a great quote, Pam, that you had found. The reason the writing of the novel is going so slow isn't because the baby is crying so much. It's because the baby is smiling so much.
Well, Brent, that speaks to this idea of energy and aligning ourselves, that different maybe, so to speak, competing things in our lives. like basically you'd think that it would drain us, but sometimes these very different things actually contribute a lot of energy, and I think that we all can pay attention to that and learn from that. So this was Mary Catherine Bateson talking about her mom, Margaret Mead, and who was saying, you know, it's not that my novel's going slow, but it's not because of the baby crying, it's because of the joy. And I don't know, I think there's something to be noted in that. What's bringing us the joy, it gives us the energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the baby smiling so much that also makes the novel so good. Great. Thank you very much, Pam. Now, what the other thing I think is so great about these three incredible panelists that we have is, as we're talking kind of some conceptual things, they're bringing to life tools and application and what this means, how we actually live this out, not just how we think about this, but how we actually live this out in our lives. And the second set of questions, we're dealing with practices to support. So what is the practical application? But what you'll see is all three of them have already kind of integrated some of that, because it's obviously not just about the knowledge that we gain, which all three, Pam, Jeff, and Matthew, all three have done a lot of research in their own lives in this, but it's not just about having the knowledge, it's being able to apply that. And so as we come up with these two questions, I'm going to put both these questions up right away, because all three of you have already kind of alluded to some of this. And so I'll just ask that you maybe even create more of a concrete answer to either or both of these. So do you know the difference? Do you know the difference between good tired and bad tired? And can we grow as leaders without hitting the pause button in the space between the lines of our lives? Solitude, silence, reflection, those types of things. And so let's start with Jeff on this one. Jeff, what are your thoughts in these areas?
Well, as I think of this, I think particularly again of the years as a pastor, and I go back to that in part, and I want to echo what you said at the very beginning, Brent. I'm not an expert in this. I'm on the journey. I had 20 years of learning to live into a pastor's rhythm. I'm now in my third year in the Dean of Students, and it's a very different rhythm. 20 years of it all being about Sundays, and now it's all about semesters, and I'm still learning and still trying to figure out what the real rhythm is that is going to bring a greater shalom to my life. So I'm still learning. I'm still trying to hear the music and dance to it right now. But I think back to the years as a pastor and the pattern that develops of the adrenaline rush of preaching on Sundays, the energy that's expended, creates then a low in the adrenaline Sunday night, Monday, and even into Tuesday. And I remember a lot of my colleagues who would take Monday as the day off. That's kind of the traditional understanding. Pastor takes Monday as a day off. And I tried that for a while, and I came to realize that Mondays were a much better day for me to do some of those mundane tasks. The things that I could do, the emails to respond to or other administrative tasks, not that they're not important, but things that I could do without having to pour my soul into them, so that I could take a Sabbath day for myself later in the week when I was refreshed enough to be able to enjoy and live into that time of rest. There's a danger for pastors, and Archibald Hart, in his book on adrenaline and stress, and I've heard him speak, talks about the danger of an addiction to this kind of adrenaline for pastors. You have that high, and you don't want to go into that low. You don't want to live into that rhythm, and so pastors will sometimes be tempted to find other exciting things to keep the adrenaline going that are dangerous and that are unhealthy for a person. Instead, there's that understanding. When I'm preaching on Sunday, there's a good tired to that. I'm supposed to be pouring myself into this. I should be low on adrenaline. I should be tired Sunday night and Monday. That's part of that rhythm I need to live into. There's the bad tired when I'm doing things I'm not called to do, or when I'm trying to keep that adrenaline high and I end up with a deeper low at some point. There's danger in not living into that that rhythm that God creates. For me, it meant Sunday was a day to use for lesser tasks because I was a good tired from Sunday, so that later on, when I'm tired from the work of the week, I could be at least energized enough to make good benefit of a Sabbath time. So again, it's learning what's that rhythm. How does that work? It worked great for 20 years. That rhythm doesn't work in academia. This is a different world, and I'm trying to figure out what that rhythm looks like. I'm still trying to learn that. But it's listening and sensing. Am I tired because of what I'm doing is what I'm called to do? Or am I trying to live into something I'm not, or set up a pattern or a rhythm that really isn't something I can dance to?
Yeah, very good words. And even as you bring that up, being aware of, like you said, the rhythms of the past may not change, even in a pastoral role. As I've talked with pastors who changed region of the country, or being a pastor in Michigan is different than being a pastor in California, and the rhythms of life, even though it's still the pastor's life, there is a significant difference. And so it's good. Thank you for pointing that out. And that was something enlightening to me as well the other day as we talked, is just paying attention to those things also. So thank you, Jeff. Pam.
Well, I absolutely love good tired, and I think bad tired has a terrible ripple on the people who are close to me. And so I guess, for each of us, are we aware of that? Are we aware of what good tired does to us and for others? And then are we aware of what bad tired does? And I have to tell you, I'm just anxious to sort of pass the ball to Matthew on this, because I enjoyed so much a conversation getting ready for our webinar. When I asked him, I said, Matthew, do you think that leaders, can grow without hitting the pause button, and in putting into place some spiritual practices? And I loved his answer, and so I'm just going to throw the ball to Matthew.
Okay, I'm catching it, and I have it very close at heart. Brent, you're going to get a little bit of my personality in my response here.
Looking forward to it.
Absolute, adamant no. It is an impossibility to be able to grow what we are discussing without solitude and silence. And here's why. As I've learned and as I've grown, I recognize that what we are discussing is a learned ability, not a given capacity. It's a learned ability, not a given capacity. Here's what I mean. In Pella here, we have a CrossFit gym. I'm one of those CrossFitter cult people, that's what they say about them. And what my coaches tell me is that a good tired is an effective and an efficient development of muscle tissue. A bad tired is when we are tired because of going through the exercise, but the movements are incurring injury and compromising secondary and tertiary muscles that eventually you're either not going to finish the exercise or you're going to get injured for the next day. So the good tired really is when there are effective and efficient movements and mechanics to actually build muscle tissue and don't compromise surrounding muscles so that you can't even do it anymore. And going back to what Jeff was talking about, that's exactly it. If there is only this high that's generated as a result of focusing on preaching or anything else that's a focus, then we begin to compromise other aspects of our lives. I come home tired, don't have any energy for my family. I'm not present and available when others, friends want to speak to me, or I'm not even available for God for that matter, because it just feels lonely and empty. So the good tired really is effective and efficient. The bad tired compromises and we incur injury.
Even what I hear you saying is it's more than even just the effect that the bad tired has on us as individuals, but there is a collateral damage that comes from being tired in a bad way. It not only
Indeed.
affects us, but it affects our families, it affects our ministry, it affects our workplace.
Yes, and then it's playing catch up from there.
Hmm. So,
Sometimes, if we're willing to be honest enough, uh, listening to those closest to us can help us sense when we're getting out of rhythm.
hmm,
When I first came to this job in particular, and my family would be able to speak better whether I'm learning the rhythms better or not. But when I first came to this new job, I was getting very weary because I hadn't figured out a rhythm. I was coming home very tired, and I was grouchy and grumpy. And one of the comments, and I forget whether it was my wife or one of my kids, but they made the comment that they much preferred Pastor Jeff to Dean Shydock.
wow.
Uh, and that brought me up short and said, I need to figure this out. I need to step back. I need to hit the pause button. I need to take some time to reflect prayerfully on where am I going with this. I am damaging those around me, and I don't want to do that. I need to step back and take note of where I'm at and what this rhythm needs to look like so I have a good tired from doing the things I need to do, not a bad tired that hurts others.
Mm-hmm. The good thing about what you're saying, Jeff, is that in CrossFit and exercising, our bodies won't lie to us. So if we're compromising, we will see the collateral damage. And what you're talking about is to have those that are close to us give us perspective, but that requires vulnerability to do so as a leader. We've got to remain in a vulnerable place to have that receptivity for that kind of input. That's good, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a great reminder and such a great lesson to learn. Thank you, all of you. There's another quote that kind of went along with these that classical physics has taught us that energy is finite and should be conserved, but when it comes to observing human potential, energy is contagious and empowering.
Mm.
I think if you just ponder that quote for a moment, maybe screen cap that
Mm-hmm.
we could probably spend a good 30 minutes just talking about some of those perspectives and what that means. Because sometimes when we should be overly tired, because of what it is that we're doing, the significance and the power in living in line with our created purpose, there is a tremendous amount of energy that seems to emerge from that, which goes against the whole concept of energy flowing. It has its source, and the further it gets from its source, it dwindles. Uh, and so that's just a great perspective and a reminder of how important it is to be living in line with our created purpose and listening to figure that out. Another one, and falling in line once again with all that Pam, Jeff, and Matthew have been saying this whole time, paying attention to what investments give us life and what drains us or takes life out of us, gives us indicators for vitality. Jeff and Matthew and Pam all alluding to this. What are those things? In my family, we often talk about the fruit. What is the fruit of what we're doing? And we know the fruits of the spirit, the positive things, and there are the negative things that come out of that. And so to be constantly asking ourselves, so what is it in what I'm doing that brings me life, and how do I return to that when I'm feeling that maybe some of the life is being taken out of me? Because no matter what we're doing, there's always going to be those things within our work, within our calling, that's going to drain us a bit. And so to be aware, to be listening to the rhythms within our own lives, to know sometimes when we need to turn back to some of those things that bring us more life.
Brent, one of the things that's coming to my mind as I think about myself and all the leaders who are listening is that no matter how kind of how well we're performing, so to speak, there is always, and even how vibrant our relationship with the Lord may be at this particular spot in our lives, it always seems to require a measure of courage to sit quietly with the Lord. But what is so dependable is that once we get that courage, that we can absolutely count on hearing the voice of God's love and the reminders from God of the giftedness that He has given to us to share with others. But there seems to be a bit of a hurdle in the courage component. And I just, for all of us and for myself, but once we jump over the courage fence and sit quietly and listen, God is faithful to tell us how much He loved us and the voice of love that we can hear. So this Advent season, I would just encourage us to all have that courage.
Thank you for the challenge, Pam. And one thing I'll remind those of you who are listening is, as questions come to mind, I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions popping up. And so we'll go with this. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to go to your little questions tab and punch in some of those and see, because we are hoping to be able to respond to some of those. So far, one of them is that you, Brent? It says that it's Rob Lone. Rob is currently on jury duty. He was going to be our technical expert in this, but he, of all weeks, he got jury duty this week. So he's not with us, even though his name is with us a couple times here. But as we are nearing the end and digesting a lot of what is being presented, this is kind of a conclusion and a question at the same time that we kind of came up with. If rhythm is the preferred paradigm for the life of a leader over balance, how do we hear the voice of God in us more clearly? So let's just throw it out there. Who wants to jump on this one first?
Well, I turned my hand on that, so I'll pass to Jeff and Matthew.
I was just going to jump in and say I would go back to what you had on the previous slide about paying attention to what gives us life, what drains us of life. And one of the practices that has been helpful to me, and I know to many others through the history of the church, has been the prayer of examen. Taking some time out, whether it's daily or weekly or every year or whatever season, to look back and ask yourself prayerfully, asking God to show us, because we can lie to ourselves, we can make ourselves either far better than we really are, or guilt ourselves into feeling really bad about things. But to ask God prayerfully to show us, over this past week, what has given me life, or what has drained life from me, or what has brought me joy and what has taken away my joy, or what has made me more angry and what has helped me calm that anger that I'm struggling to overcome. I think about that as a good way of paying attention to those rhythms. That was one of the things that I tried to do when my family was commenting on how much easier it was to live with Pastor Jeff, is to say, okay, Lord, you show me. You reveal to me, where are these things that are making me so tired and so grumpy and so difficult to live with, so that I can start making some changes, so that I can start a new pattern, a new rhythm here to figure out what life looks like now that I'm working at the seminary. So I think that right in itself, turning that into that prayer of examen, a prayer saying, Lord, you show me what's bringing me joy and what's taking away my joy, what's energizing me or giving me life, what's sucking the life right out of me, so that I can start seeing where I need to be putting myself to be energized, where I need to be avoiding those things that are creating that bad, tired, that's hurtful to myself and to others.
Thank you, Jeff. Now I'd say careful what you ask for. I asked for a couple questions, and we got some really good ones coming in here. As we were all joking, we said we could turn this webinar into a 3-part series, and especially with some of these great questions that we're getting. So I'm actually going to just sorry to cut you off, maybe Matthew, but maybe you could respond to one of these questions as I look through the ones that we have. Um, let me pick one of these. Here's a great practical application one. As a leader, is it better to take lengthy periodic sabbatical or include micro sabbaticals throughout the journey instead? Or is there a good combination of both? Matthew, do you have a kind of a perspective on that?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question there, Brent?
Sorry. It was, as a leader, is it better to take a lengthy periodic sabbatical or include micro sabbaticals through the journey instead? Or is a combination best?
Yes. I think to respond to that question, it depends on your soul's path to God. I was just thinking about Gary Thomas writing a book called Sacred Pathways. And it's a wonderful book that begins to unpack that all of us uniquely have a sacred pathway or a bent that enables us with these spiritual developments within us, and to discover that. And it may be for some that it's periodic, but it may be for some that they need to just decompress and delayer and have a long period of time. I know that I require both. I require an extended period of time once a year and periodic micro moments. But along with that, I think we also need intentional friendships, because like Jeff was saying, to have intentional friendships that actually help us to unmask, become unveiled, that helps us work with the very heart of what God's working with in us. That's the incarnational aspect of God working with us.
Yeah, which actually touches on another question. Talking about the community aspect to hearing what God is trying to say to us. And I'm not exactly sure there's a couple different ways we could go with that, but I think you, Matthew, and Jeff have talked about that. Just um, we're not the sole receivers of what God is saying, even for our own lives, and so it's important to have those relationships, like you had just said, and Jeff, earlier you talked about your wife or your kids or those godly people, to receive godly counsel, and to surround ourselves with those opportunities to hear. Because sometimes when we run what we feel God is saying to us through our own filter of desires and hopes and dreams and fears, sometimes it gets a little bit skewed. So it's important to have those other godly people around to help encourage us, shed light on some things, and hold us accountable as well.
It can help us to hear the music of the rhythm in relationship. Part of that is the vertical relationship of prayer, of taking time, hit that pause button, taking that time out to invite God to show us what He's doing in our lives, but also the horizontal, whether it's spouse, family, whether it's that close spiritual friend, somebody alongside can help us to hear the music better for our own lives, so that we can live into that rhythm, so that we can dance more effectively. I think relationship, whether it's with God or with others around us, is going to be the way to help hear that music the best way and to live into that rhythm.
Yeah. Great words. Thank you. I forgot to go to this slide, but they came in a flurry. And if we didn't quite get to answering your question directly, if you did post one of us, or maybe multiple of us on the panel on this end, will be sending you some communication and some of our thoughts about your questions, because there's some really good questions that were asked. And as they weren't coming in earlier, I kind of let some things go a little bit longer, which I think was great stuff. There's always so many different great ways, different avenues that we can go on as we talk about some of these great things. And we have people who are deeply doing all that they can to hear and listen where God is leading. So many great things come from that. And so as we move on from this webinar here, it's almost 1 o'clock. I just want to thank you, Pam, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Matthew, for the time that you put in to meeting with us and getting this prepared and taking time to pray and ask God what He's wanting us to share. Thank you. You in these weeks leading up to this, I personally have been greatly blessed in the times that we've been able to talk. And so I want to thank you for the time that you put in, and for the people that you are, and how you are desperately seeking after God's will for your lives, and what that means going forward. So I appreciate you, and I'm very thankful for who you are, and for the time you've committed to this, and for the lessons that you are sharing with us as you are learning them yourselves. So thank you.
Thanks,
You're
Brent.
welcome. And thank you, everyone, for giving us the gift of your time.
Mhm. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Matthew.
We have a couple more things we want to show you here real quick. Our next VP3 webinar, what we're learning about adult development, Wednesday, February 25th at 12 o'clock. So save the date, 12 o'clock, that's Central Time. So save the date, put that on your calendar. We're looking forward to connecting with you all, and sharing with you a little bit about some of the research and some of the learning that we're finding as we do this work that we do with churches and organizations across North America. The other thing, we have a slide of resources, some of the things that were suggested by the panelists as well as from Rob Lone. So maybe take a screen cap of this. I'll leave this up for a bit. Looking at if you felt a nudge that maybe there's a part of you that needs to learn a little bit more, these are some great resources to start digging into, to help grow deeper in our ability to listen and hear that rhythm that God is that music that He's playing for us to dance to. And last but certainly not least on the slide, if you'd like to learn more about who we are at Vantage Point 3 and the process of the journey, you can connect with me. There's my email and my phone number. Check us out online. And I added those last two. I always like to see those likes on Facebook and follows on Twitter. It's great to have you all here with us today. So once again, thank you for spending this time with us. So I'll just close us in prayer. Actually, I'll ask Pam, would you care to close us in prayer?
Lord of our lives, I give you thanks for each one of us. Give you thanks for the ripple of ministry that we have, and the deep desire in each of us to be a passionate follower of yours, but to do it in a way that is inviting and has your kind of music, a music that is different than the world's, and that is very compelling in this season. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pam. And once again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you for all of you who took an hour out of your day today to join us. Blessings on all of you as we continue ourselves doing our best to listen, catch that rhythm, and live into that rhythm that God has created us for us to live into. So blessings on all of you. Thanks again, Pam, Jeff, and Matthew.